There's a point where people start to sense that their intuition, creativity, and weird little knowings aren't random at all. But they have no idea how to trust them, let alone use them. Today's guest discovered something most folks never realize, and we'll circle back to that, exactly what that is, by the end of our conversation. Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, transformational coaches, and spiritual entrepreneurs stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible. If you're ready to start attracting premium clients without chasing algorithms or hunting people down like a banshee on a mission, head over to coachesalchemist.com and schedule your free client acquisition audit. It's the first step to building a business where your clients seek you out rather than you having to hunt them down. Today, we are chatting with Tracy Nicholas. Tracy works where folklore, mindful living, and creativity meet. As an animist and lifelong student of practical magic, her work explores how ancient stories, nature wisdom, and modern life intertwine. She hosts the podcast Folkloring, serves as the theater and film correspondent for the Folklore Podcast, and designs immersive escape room style games rooted in story and symbolism. With a background in stage management from Columbia College and a master's in learning and organizational change from Northwestern University, she brings both intuition and science into the conversation. She's also the author of Mind Over Magic and lives on Chicago's North Shore under the watchful eye of her feline supervisor, Pat. Welcome to the show, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's get this party started, shall we?
Yes.
What's the most significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
Well, I think that it's getting involved, really. And of course, we can only do so much, and you have to know your limits and focus on what you can do. And maybe that's political for you, maybe that's energy work for you, maybe that's connecting with nature in a positive way. I think that it's just a matter of not continuing to mindlessly consume and find ways to connect to the world around you, whether that's people or animals or nature in general. I mean, go hug that tree.
I love trees. I'm growing a forest in my backyard.
Oh,
When I
that's
moved
great.
there was one tree. It was very lonely.
Oh,
So it invited its friends over, and I planted some, and we've got almost 100 trees in various stages of growth in 5 years.
I loved finding out that one of the ways that trees communicate with each other is through like an underground network of mycelium, right?
Yep.
And so just that sort of, symbiotic relationship. And so I always think of it every time I see trees, and I see them often because I live across the street from an arboretum.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, that was just the coolest thing to find out.
And we're going to talk a little bit about magic and how magic shows up in our lives. And I think
Mhm.
trees are a perfect place to start with that because trees are magical. They they generate energy and
Mhm.
they move water around in our systems. And in my worldview, magic is just science that hasn't been explained properly.
Of course.
It's not, it is magic, but it's not like a mystery. It is now a mystery. Someday it probably won't be. But trees are so powerful.
Mhm.
And we just look at them and think, "Oh, yeah, that's a tree."
Yeah, I find it really interesting that there used to be a theory. So, do you know the term crown shyness?
Mm,
So, if trees are all about the same size, they tend to not overlap their branches when they're near each other, right?
oh, yeah, yeah.
There's like, you can look up and there's like a little, space
Mhm.
around. And they used to think that it was because the trees like somehow like figured out they didn't like the rubbing the branches. But then they came up, I heard recently that it's more like they're being polite to each other.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to take your son. So I thought that that was really fascinating. I don't know how they determine that, but I heard that recently that now the theory has changed.
It's interesting because trees will move, and trees, we were talking about, they talk to each other. They do talk to each other, and they nourish each other
Oh yeah.
underground. There's a place in Utah that has quaking aspens, and it's the largest living organism on the planet
Oh.
because it's one organism, lots of trees, there's thousands of
Hmm.
trees on this
Hmm.
on in this organism, but
Hmm.
they're all connected. And you get that going. I have it going in my yard. I have poplar trees, and there's a
Hmm.
mama tree that's in my neighbor's yard, and then all the babies are showing up in my yard, and they give themselves enough space to be a big tree. So they don't
Hmm.
there's not like 9,000 of them sprouting up right next to each other. They space themselves out. And if you plant another tree over there with them,
Hmm.
it's kind of like they say, "Oh, come on in." I I had this one tree that I brought from my son's house, and it was a good sized tree. It's maybe 14 feet tall, and I was afraid that it wasn't going to live, and I planted it, and I talked to it, and I encouraged it, and I stuck it right next to this other group of trees, and then I waited a few weeks and all the leaves turned brown and
Hmm.
it was like, oh no. And I put my hand on it. I was gonna pull it out, and my husband, who was mowing the lawn, he points at it, and I looked really close, and there's all these baby green leaves.
Oh,
It it took, and now
nice.
it's super happy and living next to his buddies. And
Yeah, they say that even if a tree is cut down, if it's around other trees, they will continue to nourish the roots and just,
Mhm.
keep it going.
Yeah. And that's how baby trees get going under
Mhm.
those big canopies because they don't
Yeah,
get light, so they have to
right.
be nourished from the roots up.
Hmm.
So, and
All
that's where
right.
the
So
fairies live
so we established that trees are magical
and home for fairies who are
and home
also
for fairies.
magical
Yes.
and not necessarily always like having your best interest at heart. This is something I just learned this weekend.
Oh no, no, not at all. Like that's why people say things like the good folk,
Hmm.
because they don't want to anger the fairies, and why you leave out offerings for them that they're going to like want, because it's not that they're, you know, dark or evil or anything like that. They just live by a completely different code of ethics.
Hmm.
And so, some things like they'll see an attack as like, hey, you did something bad to me, you know? And of course, you hear like, don't step in a fairy circle. Um, and so, which fairy circles are cool in and of themselves. But they say, oh, you'll be whisked off to the land of the Fae, and then they'll make you, dance all night. Don't ever eat any food if you get into the land of the Fae. And yeah, be careful. Put out those offerings because they will come for you.
And don't do them in your house because if they
Yep.
get in your house, you can't get them out. And
Well, there are some good like house spirits, which I would consider to be part of like the world of Fae.
Mhm.
There's house spirits that clean up overnight. There's house spirits that repair things. So, there's some good. But
Set your
again,
boundaries.
you have to leave out offerings for them. You can't um, thank them or it'll offend them, and then they'll leave and you won't have your house fairy anymore. And so there's lots of rules to that too. So you got to be careful there.
And do you cover all these rules in your book?
I No, I don't, because really what I'm looking at is what can we prove today. I
Hmm.
talk about fairies and I talk about the belief systems behind them,
Hmm.
but in my opinion, at this point, we cannot prove that. And I tend to focus in the book on things that scientifically we can prove
Hmm.
or that have what the psychological basis is. But, when you're talking about magic, there's just as many people that believe in magic as don't believe in magic, right? And so
Hmm.
you can't just say because people believe it or don't, you know. People who don't believe in it tend to use examples like, oh, you're going to wave your wand and a bag of money will appear. No, it doesn't work that way. Um, but if it's like, we can't just say because these people don't believe in it, it's not real, because, these other people do believe in it. And I think that they have experiences, like they believe it because they have had experiences that say to them, yeah, spirit is real. I've talked to a ghost. Magic is real. Fairies are real. I work with them. And as a folklorist, to me, it doesn't matter if those stories are true or not, right?
Hmm.
It matters that people believe them and why they believe them. Maybe they're talking, this is, a some sort of like metaphor, or maybe it's just symbolism, or maybe they're talking about, going into a trance and then they visualize something. It doesn't matter. If you say fairies are real, I'm going to say, hey, that's interesting. Why do you think that?
I've seen shape shifting before, so I was like, and I question it myself, but I know what I saw.
Yeah, I've seen I saw shapeshifting for the first time back in August of this year,
Hmm.
2025. And it was wild. And like I know what I know. That happened, right? And I've met a ghost on a couple of occasions, and
Hmm.
honestly, it's like most ghost stories I hear from people who actually have are saying they know ghosts. It
Hmm.
was completely mundane, totally boring, normal conversation. Didn't know anything was up until after it was over.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
that's just how it works. It's
yeah.
like
I mean,
it's not it's not like the super, there's no music playing in the background. And I think that's what makes us have these weird feelings when we're thinking that, well, there should be the spooky music so we know how we're supposed to feel when we're talking to this person, and anticipation of what's going to happen next.
Yep, it was in a well-lit lobby that I happened to be, by myself in with a locked door. And there was a knock on the door, and I let him in. And
Hmm.
he asked to use the bathroom. I said, sure. And he goes and uses the bathroom. And then the actors started coming out. And I said to the last couple of actors, like, hey, don't leave. I don't want to be here alone with this dude. He's been in there a long time.
Hmm.
And I was sitting about 3 feet from the door to the men's room.
Hmm.
And one of the guys, I finally said, look, maybe he's sick. Like, can you go in and check on this dude? And he goes in and he comes out and he's like, there's nobody in there. And I was like, what? And then I remembered what he said was specifically at the door. He said, I was here earlier. Can I use the restroom? And I said, sure. And so then, I searched the theater and there was nobody there. I got into work the next day and I said to the woman who actually worked for the building, I said,
Hmm.
hey, a weird thing happened last night. And she just looks at me and said, oh, you saw the ghost. And then she told me the whole story about how he died and all this. But yeah, it was like completely normal encounter until it wasn't.
Yeah. We don't rarely do things come out of whole cloth. I won't say never, but
Right.
it's very rare.
Hmm.
And there's all these stories about encounters with ghosts, relationships with ghosts. I mean, we're talking about fairies, dragons, all of these things that are that people have experiences with, and we
Hmm.
both experience shape shifting. I'm not even sure that the person I saw shapeshift knows he's a shapeshifter.
The guy that I saw shapeshift had no idea it had happened because we
Yeah.
talked about it after. Yeah. And there's also, the stories are worldwide, right? And
Hmm.
that would be if there wasn't something happening, it would be very unusual to see those stories all over the world. But you do. But people speculate because, people want to understand death and all. So,
Hmm.
okay, maybe it's that. But there are such specific types of ghosts. There are interactive ghosts. There are ghosts that are like in a place and they're caught in a loop. There, so, and those stories tend to be worldwide as well. And so, then again, back to, put my folkloring hat on, why those stories? Why believe it? Why are some places haunted and other places are not? And, so you start to ask those questions. Now, I don't think we're in a place where we can prove or disprove spirit because we don't truly understand how consciousness works at this point.
Mhm.
Like, we know we can like put people under if they're going to have surgery, right? We don't know why that works. Like, we know what works, but we don't really understand it. And so,
Or where
to
they go,
what?
or where they go when they're under surgery, and you can't ask them because they don't know.
No, no, it's a complete blank after. And so it it's like we don't understand enough to understand if consciousness can go on past life, because that's what a spirit is, right?
Mhm.
It's your consciousness in the state that it was when you were alive, or sometimes when you were younger for dementia patients and stuff like that. But we can't we like they're saying, oh, a body's 2 ounces lighter and that's the soul leaving. Is it? I don't know. I mean, sometimes bodily fluids are released. Maybe that's it. Who knows? But we, until we understand consciousness, we can't truly define whether or not consciousness lives on past life. And that would be what would prove that, yeah, spirit is real.
And you can't even ask, I know there's lots of near-death experiences out there, but because it was just near death, even if you were clinically dead and came back,
Hmm.
you still can't definitively say, yes, that was the experience well, it was the experience you had, but it's not definitive that it's an afterlife because
Exactly.
you apparently weren't dead because you're back.
Right. And
It's not
that
like,
and there's a lot of theories on that. It's like, oh, your electrical, pulses in your brain are starting to die down, so weird stuff happens in your
Mhm.
brain. And one of those things is seeing the light. And, so there are other potential explanations for it. So, again, we can prove that like people are experiencing this. We just can't prove why at this point because we don't understand enough about the brain right now.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating. I mean, just all of these bits and pieces. We can't even just, Bigfoot is a good example, or the Loch Ness Monster. There's some evidence that they exist,
Hmm.
but nobody's really seen definitively, oh yeah, this is it. Um, but and mermaids. But you've got all this old architecture and anthropological, archaeological sites out there that point to, you know, chimeras
Hmm.
existing at some
Right.
point. I, if you watch Ancient Aliens, they're going to be like, we suggest that this is what it is. And,
Right.
could be, could
Right.
be not.
Yeah, I have a guy that I interviewed once, and he went on this big long description of how one of his good friends is a Selkie.
Hmm.
And so, and I'm like, have you ever seen her with her seal skin on or just like straight up human form? And he was like, human form. I was like, okay, that's, you know, I have not met a Selkie, but, I haven't been to Scotland. So,
Yeah. Is it possible? Yeah. In my
hmm.
worldview, anything is possible.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've seen and experienced things that are just like I can't explain them.
Hmm.
And uh, like I've seen dark entities. I had a dark entity throw me across the room once.
Wow.
And it was in a I'm I thought it was a dream,
Hmm.
but then I was in my bed. It was like awake, a dream.
Hmm.
That one. The other time I saw it go across the room,
Hmm.
and I know what I saw. That freaked me out. But I was awake for that one. But I don't know. Is
Yeah.
my mind playing tricks on me?
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen dark entities before. And it's a lot of times like then you look at it and it's gone, right? I remember I was in the middle of a divorce. This was years ago, and I woke up and my husband often worked overnight because he was a rigger for concerts, and so
Hmm.
he would have to stay for the concert and take the stuff down. And I woke up and there was this dark figure standing over me, and I looked right at him and he was there, and then I like blinked and he was gone. And I was like, and it felt very, ominous. It felt very
Yeah.
threatening. And so I you know, it was gone, so I didn't, think anything of it. And after I moved out of that house and into my own house, I ended up, I can't believe I'm going to admit this, I ended up reading Eat, Pray, Love.
Hmm.
And in the pray part of it, there was a shaman or something that she was studying with, right? And she um the shaman describes these like three brothers, and they're supposed to be protective spirits, and one of them would be exactly like protecting from, like it was like I was on the right side of the bed and it was right next to me, and my husband's side of the bed was left side, and so it was like sort of aiming that energy at his side of the bed
Hmm.
was my later interpretation. Was that really it? I don't know. I'm not one to get sleep paralysis. I've only had it once or twice in my life.
Hmm.
Um, although uh, sleep demons are very interesting. Uh, but yeah, that's not what happens to me.
I've had sleep paralysis, and the dark entities are different than sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis generally happens I am asleep and I'm trying to like talk or scream usually,
Right,
and
right.
you can't because you're paralyzed.
Well, a lot of people have described it as feeling like a heavy weight on the chest. It
Mhm.
has been described as like an old witch is sitting on you. There's a lot of or a demon is, sitting on you. But yeah, like I said, it's happened for me. The couple of times it happened, it was exactly like that, and it was triggered by an unusual noise happening. And I assume it was like I was just waking up or just, like getting like my lighter sleep cycle. And so, it sounded like something was coming up the stairs, and that triggered it, to wake up. I
Mhm.
If I have nightmares, yeah, I sometimes start to scream and it wakes me up before I really start.
I get trapped in it.
Oof, that's got to be terrifying.
It is. It's like I can't move, can't tell anybody. It's just like I can
Yep.
feel it coming out. So your approach blends folklore, science, and magic in a grounded way. How do you explain that intersection to somebody who's curious but skeptical?
Well, I think that we have to turn back to what we know, what we don't know, and what we can't ever possibly know. And I think that things that people have described in the past as magic there's scientific proof behind them, right?
Mhm.
And so I talk about things like when people are like, oh, I'm sending you energy, right? And the example I give there is a really common sense one. When you go to a concert, you can tell if it's a good energy, right? And
Mhm.
if like the energy goes back and forth between the people and the musicians or actors or whatever it is.
Hmm.
So we know we exchange energy, right? And so if I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to send you healing energy, right? Well, can we heal ourselves? And for that, I look to the placebo effect, right? And when I think about the placebo effect, that is well, let me stop there. When I think about magic, magic is changing something within yourself or the world around you in a way that doesn't involve mechanical intervention as we understand it, right?
Hmm.
So, placebo effect. I take a pill. It doesn't have any ingredients in it that are going to do anything. And my brain says, oh, there's medicine. And so, whatever condition I have or illness I have, I get better. So, basically, nothing happened to make me better. The brain just decides and then heals me. Like, how is that not magical? And so we know we can heal. We know we can exchange energy, but those things are up close, right?
Hmm.
So then we turn to quantum physics, right? And this is science that we've known about for 100 years more. And when I look at entanglement, right? And so quantum entanglement is the theory that people do when they have interactions. They have physical ties on the quantum level, right? And we maintain those connections no matter how far we are from each other. That's real. Einstein was talking about this, right? He called it spooky action at a distance.
Hmm.
So, to prove that, we look toward quantum game theory. And quantum game theory is we're about how the quantum level affects us. So if you take what's known as a Bayesian game, which is a logic game in which the players don't have enough information to play without guessing, essentially.
Hmm.
And so a very simple example would be like envision a grid with three squares across and three squares down. And two people will be playing this game. And one person can only fill in, a circle on the rows, and one person can only fill in, a square or an X on the columns. And
Hmm.
so they each choose where they're going to put their symbol, right?
Hmm.
And if they both put the symbol in the same square, they lose the game. If they do different squares, they win the game. And so it just keeps going until they get the same square. Now, for people who have connected with each other, if they had a conversation, they've talked, whatever, they will do statistically better than they should if they were just guessing, right? And this is, a provable phenomenon. It's been tested over and over. It has even in more complex games. And
Hmm.
so, and even if they don't talk to each other, see each other, look at each other during the game, they do better than they should. And that is because of that quantum entanglement. And so when people are talking about cutting cords, that's a real thing, right? You are
Hmm.
still, connected physically to your ex, right? So what do you do about that? Well, the answer is not visualizing scissors cutting a cord. That's not it, right? The answer is that you lose some of your older entanglements when you create new ones. So this is like what we were talking about earlier. Go create an entanglement with the trees in your backyard. Go hug them. Go hug them. But get a pet. Talk to your friends. Go on a walk and listen to the birds. Like anything that you can do, even if you pick up beloved objects in your house, all of those things are a strong current entanglement and they weaken other entanglements. Now, should you also think about, visualizing it? Yeah, that's a great ritual, right? It is a good way to say, I'm in control of this. I am not just helplessly attached to this person. And that lets you reclaim your power, which brings you more to your present moment and
Mhm.
gets you not obsessing about an ex or, whatever, somebody said something rude to you earlier and you want to say no, this is my power. So I think that ritual in general is great for that kind of thing because it frames your thinking around what you want. And that's where I think, manifestation, sort of the right idea. I don't think it goes far enough, right?
Mhm.
Because the magical and the mundane are not two separate things. We keep them in separate boxes, but it's not like that. The mundane is the magic. And so part of that is creating the right mindset around practicing the kinds of magic that we know to be real. And I'm not talking about like pseudoscience stuff and all of that. I just think that part of what we need to do is make sure we're using all the tools in that we have available to us because you need to do it all, and you need to like meditate regularly so your emotions are, better under your control and you're doing that purposefully. So all of the things that you do, you wouldn't expect to go to the gym after not having gone for years and be lifting as much as, people who go every day for years, right? You have to practice those things. And so that's what you can do for yourself to make your life more magical, really.
So earlier we talked about that moment when people realize their gifts aren't really random. What
Hmm.
is the deeper understanding they're actually tapping into, and how can listeners begin to recognize it in themselves?
Well, I think that, part of it is what we just talked about.
Mhm.
When you're talking, um, clairvoyancy, right? So a lot of that is again explained by what these connections are between us. I think that everybody, when you're talking about clairaudience and all of the different clair senses, it is important to pay attention because I think all too often we say, no, I'm imagining that, or no, and for me, what happens for me is I get an earworm, right? Some random song will suddenly start um, just running through my head, and I can't figure it out. Within a day or so, I'm like, oh, that's what that was about, because I paid attention. If I just thought, oh, this is so annoying, I don't want to think about it, and I pushed it out, then I wouldn't make the connection, right? And I think a funny thing happened to me not too long ago. I kept hearing these dogs barking, and that's not unusual for my neighborhood because everybody has dogs. And but what would happen, it was all day long, which is really strange for around here. And I'm like, are these dogs outside? Are they locked out of the house? And so I'd go to listen to hear where it was coming from. And as soon as I'd step out onto my porch, it would stop. I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. And so, but I didn't think, and it was bugging me for days and days and days. And then I was talking to a guy who is a channeler, and one of the goddesses he works with is Hecate. And I was relaying this story to him because he had been telling me, like, oh, one of Hecate's symbols are dogs, right? She always has a couple dogs with her. And I start to tell him this story, and he basically starts channeling Hecate and says, oh, yeah, that was me. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. So then the next day, I'm at home, and the neighbors had guests visiting, and the guest had this yippy little dog, right? And it was outside, and it was just bugging me. It was yipping and yipping and yipping, right? And I was like, oh, I wonder, I maybe I should set up some representation of Hecate on my altar or something. And like into my head pops the phrase, no, that's not me. And so again, is it real? Is it just me thinking of that? It doesn't matter. It just matters what I do with the information. And I think that that's true. And everybody thinks to themselves, like everybody's got spiritual, psychic, magical imposter syndrome. We all have it. And we all, am I crazy? Am I really? And again, it's the practice. It's the practice, practice, practice that will help you identify. You can identify what energy is yours and is not. And so if you suddenly are angry when you stop in the coffee shop, like look around you, you know? And if you say something bad happens and you need help and you go in a store and there's a bunch of people around and you go ask a specific person for help, right? That
Mhm.
is their energy that is like maybe everyone is a fantastic human being, right? But maybe they're late for work, or maybe they're, not in a place emotionally where they can help you, whatever it is. But you find someone who helps you, right? You're honing in to that person's energy in the moment. But you can only do that kind of stuff if you're practicing it. So, feel the energy around you when it's low stakes, when you don't know anybody around you, when all of those kinds of things. So there's a very long-winded answer for do your work.
And it's not hard work, but it's an awareness
Yeah,
practice.
yeah.
It's like I've driven through towns where I'm just like, oh, that was so weird
Mm-hmm.
because it
Mm-hmm.
felt at that particular time it felt really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go through other places that feel just like really good. Like I live in the house that I live in now because when I first walked in, and I was gonna be buying it for my father-in-law, but
Mm-hmm.
when I first walked in, it's like, no, this is my home. I
Yep.
just knew.
Yep.
I- And if you pay attention to those inklings, and we all get them, we
Oh
we
yeah.
do know, um, kind of magical things will happen to you in those spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, when people are like, "Oh, I had a hunch," or "Oh, I had this intuition," right? Or
Mhm.
"Oh, I had deja vu." We accept that. So, on a certain level, we're already accepting that there are
Mhm.
magical things afoot because we treat those as if they are mundane,
Mhm.
you know?
It's like
And
it's okay if it's mundane, but if we call it magic,
yeah,
suddenly we're in the crazy zone.
right. And that's because, again, people exaggerate and they end up acting like it's all, like pretend magic, like fantasy fiction kind of magic. And if that's what you're, looking for, that's easy to make fun of. I would make fun of that. I have a wand, but I'm not waving it around expecting, for somebody to appear or you know, it just it doesn't,
And who
yeah.
knows, it might work under
Well,
the right circumstances.
it's the full moon tonight, so maybe I'll give it a shot later.
Yeah, there you go. You've written the book Mind Over Magic. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, a lot of the concepts that I've been talking about are included in the book. And again, I start out talking about the science that we know and how it relates to what used to be considered magical thinking. And, it's like energetic ties. We talked about how that just is something that's physically real.
Mhm.
And I talk about things that we can't that we don't know, right? Like I talked about the spirits. We can't prove that or disprove it. And I'm not going to pretend like we can, right? And maybe in, 10 years, there'll be some new breakthrough And we go, yes, of course. We've been telling you all along that spirits are real. And now you believe it. But there's a lot of hoaxes and things like that. When they used to have seances and they would pull the like cheesecloth or whatever, muslin or whatever it is, and it would be this, entity, and they would have different ways to shake the table. So I think that people are right in some ways to be skeptical because we have been scammed throughout history with magical kind of stuff. And the psychics today, I have had some very impressive readings with stuff that I didn't even know myself and found out later to be true. And it's stuff that they couldn't have possibly researched me on because it was super specific, super weird, and sometimes it was just goofy and weird. I was getting a reading once and she said, "Oh, your cat," which I had just gotten this cat. It was during lockdown, so of course I did. Your cat doesn't get along with your old cat. And I'm like, I don't have another cat. And she's like, oh, okay, well, and she said, well, you're going to want to go check because the cat has kicked some poop like out of the litter box. And I was like, okay, that's weirdly specific, but all right. So I go and I look and there was nothing there. And I was like, whatever. I get up the next morning, there's poop outside the litter box. I'm like, come on. Like, that was so specific. And like, why would someone make that up in the first place? It's just not a normal thing you would hear in a reading. So, yeah. So the book isn't going to go down a path where I say, here's how we know cryptids are real, because we don't. Right. And but it's like let's explore why people believe it, and
Mhm.
then the book kind of wraps up with some of the stuff I was talking about engaging, practicing, and it gives a lot of different techniques that you can try, things that you can work on, and a lot of those come from kind of my corporate days of working on strategic planning because I read a
Mhm.
lot of business books then. And so business improvement books are a lot of psychology. And so that's kind of where I'm drawing from the psychology of what you need to do in order to keep focusing whatever practice you want. Even if all you want to do is make your life more folklorical, there are ways to get out of your own way.
Yeah. And to let the magic in
Yeah, exactly.
and to just allow yourself to believe.
Yes.
Suspend your skepticism and just like we were talking about shapeshifters.
Hmm.
I could have just said, nah, that was just my imagination
Exactly. And that's what
and
most people do.
yeah, but it doesn't mean that it didn't actually happen or
Hmm.
doesn't exist.
Right. Right.
And it
And
doesn't have to mean anything beyond that.
that's
It
true.
can just be that it happened.
Well,
The
I think
end.
I think that one of the important parts is like when you're talking divination,
Mhm,
right? It like people are like, oh, that's not real, whatever. I think that the important part is the way we interpret it
mhm,
because I'm in a different place in my life than I'm going to be 5 years from now, right? I'm in a different circumstance this moment than I was 5 hours ago. And
mhm,
so I think of divination as like a door into your subcon, like a back door into your subconscious, right?
mhm,
Because what matters is how we take it and
mhm.
how we apply it to our circumstances. So you know, I think divination is great. I've got a pendulum. I pull cards all the time. I'm studying the runes right now because again, practice, practice, practice. So,
And it doesn't have to mean something in any particular way, but
right.
it does allow us, these tools allow us to pull back a minute from from the everyday 3D world where it's rush, 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 consume, 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 do all
Mhm.
these things that we're supposed to do, um, to just like allow the experience to unfold and to examine it
Right.
and to think about what we want to think about those things and
Mhm.
not have to have them mean something specific because somebody said this is what it is.
Right. Or we can make choices, you know. If you're cooking and you decide, I'm going to stir this food clockwise because the symbolism for me is this food is going to feed and nourish my family in the future.
Mhm.
And you want to use that symbolism, you that's great, you know. Make your own symbolic things that you do, and it can be just as easy as what I described. It can be, you know, walking through a doorway and you think about liminal spaces, right? There's so
Mhm.
many ways that you can incorporate magical thinking into your life.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tracy. This is an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
To learn more about Tracy and to get her Mind Over Magic book, please visit folkloringlife.com. And I think you can also access her podcast there. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a link to my podcast. There's a link to the book. And I do a bunch of film and not film. Uh, well, yeah, I guess I did put my film reviews on there. Film and book reviews.
Perfect. Thanks for tuning in with us today to the U World Order Showcase podcast. If you're ready to amplify your voice, monetize your mission, and start attracting premium clients, your next step is simple. Head to thecoachesalchemist.com and schedule your free client acquisition audit. Be sure to join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today and get visible.